Pierre, and you are watching Black and Nuance Podcast in HD, the video extension of my podcast that seeks to dispel the idea that all Black people are monolithic. And I have a repeat guest. He was on my original podcast, and so now I had to bring him on the video version. Orlando Lima, aka Lima Chips, aka what nickname do you go by this? Like, you still go by OJ? I call you O. So
OJ, yeah, everyone calls me OJ. You know, I brought my face for radio to the video podcast.
You look clean shaven and everything. You got it going on.
You know, I'm trying to keep it, keep it fancy every day, even though we're under these peculiar circumstances. Make sure you keep it.
I know. It's been interesting. Speaking of peculiar circumstances, last time I linked with you. So last time we actually spoke on the podcast, I think earlier this year, at the end of last year, you were VP at Def Jam,
yep.
Right?
It was last year. I was Senior Vice President at Def Jam, Brand Strategy and Content.
Oh, excuse me. Let me not mince words on your title.
Sorry. Oh, wait, you called me a Vice President?
I did!
Wow. That's terrible. I know it's hard because a lot of times, people that look like us don't get past that vice president level in corporate America. So I understand where you were going with that.
But I knew better though. I knew better because your last position at VH.
I actually broke through the glass ceiling and I was up at senior vice president. So.
Yes, you were SVP. What department was it at Def Jam?
I did brand strategy and content. So I worked under Noah Callahan Bever, who used to be the chief content officer at Complex before he came over. And
you have history and roots in Complex too, as well.
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of trickles back. So, Complex has a lot of roots all the way back to like Vibe magazine and Blaze magazine and people who work there and offshoots of Noah's people and then me, etc. So it does date back all the way back to like when I began my journalism career in the mid 90s. And then you slowly, this has happened at a bunch of places I've been at, you slowly see people come up, get a little bit older, they come into the industry, you've worked with them as interns, etc. You end up hiring them. And, the tree of people in media that I think, I directly hired has gotten really large lately. And it's a good thing to see for me. Makes me happy.
That's dope. I like it. I mean, you and I met during our VH1 days at Viacom CBS. We'll get to that eventually. And when I was making my way back to New York, because I went to Florida for a year, I used to come kick it in your office, drink a little whiskey here and there. And then I remember we had talked lightly about the barrel picking, because I think I don't know if you had just started it, but like you were really turning up, but you end up leaving your corporate position at Def Jam to do this full time. In a space where, one, there's not a lot of Black people. What made you leave to take that on full time? And then what has that transition been like, as far as like, from the commentary that I've seen, hasn't always been so welcoming of you as a Black man in that space?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. So I started getting into spirits, like heavily interested, other than recreational drinking, when I worked at Complex and I helped them launch the site First We Feast, which went on to, do the show Hot Ones. That's like their big show. And that was when I really started, fielding inquiries, et cetera, from distilleries and distillers about spirits brands. And I just really kind of took my knowledge level up from there. And then started listening to all these spirits podcasts like Bourbon Pursuit and stuff like that. And I slowly but surely got really kind of narrowed it down to the thing I like the most, being American whiskey, bourbon, and rye, and was noticing how these guys in different areas of the country, mainly white dudes, were doing these barrel picks, which meant they were going to distilleries and then being allowed to select from various barrels of whiskey and pick one, have it bottled, and then share it in their group. So there was one liquor store in New York that was kind of doing it. Well, that was in our area, in that Times Square area, 58 Wine and Liquor, run by a guy named Sean Kim. And I went over there, bought some of his picks, became a client, and then he invited me to go do a barrel pick at Four Roses, and that was the first one I ever did. It was 2.5 years ago or so. And since then I've done, I don't know, over 20, maybe closer to 30. And in all that time, I just really got into it. Like, I really realized what a great expression it was, and of whiskey, and how much I like the American style. And so on the side, I worked with him in his liquor store. Essentially, I helped him with his barrel picks. We did the picking together, And then I use my background in media to like design additional labels that were going to be on them, help with the social media, and they really started to take off. And once I started to take off, we got to about midway through last year. I was like, I really like this. Like, I like this more than just a hobby. And I've been doing corporate media and journalism and television for, going on 25 years. And I think I'm in a place in my life where I could take a break from my profession and do work on a passion project. So I knew that it wasn't just like, oh, this is so easy. You can go to a distillery and pick and buy stuff and sell it, because you're dealing with alcohol, which means you need to have specific licenses to buy and sell it. So buy from a distillery and buy and sell to a consumer. And the position I was in with working with another liquor store was that I was basically a 4th tier in a 3-tier system. So, with some stick-to-itiveness, I decided to branch out and applied for my own liquor license. And basically an e-commerce license, and was able to procure it with a partner I have in mind who's also a Black guy. And the license, we thought we were going to be in business a little bit earlier this year. But as it turned out, the COVID stuff kind of slowed down all of the licensing. But we did get our license in August, and we relaunched our website and put up our first barrel pick for sale under Taste Select Repeat a couple weeks ago. So that was our first one. We've got, one a month coming for the rest of the year. Next year will be slightly different. Like, we'll start to reorg the company when, there's a lot of supply chain issues right now. So it's hard to like get things on time, get things when you think you can. So right now we're just working on finishing up the rest of the things that are being sold to our private club. And then next year we're going to expand the business. So right now we function basically as a private club. So we are a liquor store with a liquor license, but you can't buy anything from us unless you're in our club. So,
which people pay to be part of?
People do not pay. We select the people for the club.
Oh.
It's invite only. Okay. Yeah, because the reality of what we do is that all of these spirits that we select from distilleries that we work with distillers with, they're limited edition. And so in most cases, you're not going to see more than 250 bottles. You'll likely see more like 150 bottles from a barrel. And so we had already had a fan base for 2 years. We'd been doing this with other liquor stores. So we already had a fan base of like 200 people. And then when we relaunched the site, it shot up. And so now we're probably at like 300 people, but 300 people is more people than there are bottles in a barrel. I don't believe in the scenario of charging people for a membership when they can't be guaranteed the product. In this case, so we selected the people who have been riding with us for 2 years, and then new people. And we try to bring that to kind of a new diverse group. Our group's a little different because, one of the reasons that I was interested in doing this was because I'd been to other events with other groups, and they were really homogenous, essentially. So even though we shared this love of whiskey, I just didn't really have that much fun at the groups, because it was like, going to a party that's like you and all white guys, like no women, no people of color. And, look, there's no diss to white guys or anything, but I was just like, I know so many other people who enjoy craft anything, whether it's spirits or beer or makeup companies or, boutique clothing, and like people who really love this kind of stuff and love like things that are selected. And I was like, but yet this is such a homogenous experience, and it doesn't have to be that way. So we set about really like making sure that when we do our stuff that we are trying to be inclusive of women. So like we actively try to get women to come do barrel picks with us from the group, that we're inclusive of people of color in the tri-state area, because it is just kind of like the way that we live in New York City. And so our group is just different that way. We have, an interesting mix of people from across the country, very large social footprint on like Instagram, and, generally upwardly mobile, of color, men and women, and then focused on, like, I would say, New York, tri-state area. We've got a bunch of people in Texas and a bunch of people in Cali.
Wow. And so with you being in wine and spirits industry, there's always some challenges that I think about. And I love the fact that you said that y'all are really inclusive with how you all do your barrel picking. I've seen some reckless ass comments on your account with when you're stepping into some of these spaces and going on your barrel picks and, even calling it out. And so what is it? What's the issue with Black people showing up in this space? What has been their particular issue with the people that you've encountered as well? And then how are you all tackling that?
Well, I mean, I think there's two things, right? So there's a couple things to think about here. So the first thing is that brown spirits, in particular American whiskey, like the demographics of American whiskey are changing. So in the last 3 years, the last study I read, it was like in the last 3 years, there were about 3 million new people getting into American whiskey in particular. And of those 3 million, 1.8 million were people of color. So the majority of the new consumers are people of color. And of those 1.8 million, the vast majority of them are like Latin, Hispanic. So if I had to take a guess, it's in all likelihood like, Puerto Rican guys, Dominican guys who have been drinking rum or maybe have been drinking cognac and have realized that like American whiskey is both like well crafted and has really good price points for what it is. And, they're looking for something new as they get older and like have more disposable income, and other things that they can share other than what they've been drinking their whole life. And, then there's also a lot more women, obviously a lot more Black people. So because of that, right, it's really complicated for the distillers and the companies because, the simplest way to put it is it was like when Black people started wearing Timberlands, like they just had no concept of the fact that their sales were going up because people in the city and urban areas, Black people in particular, started wearing their boots, right? They made their boots originally thinking, oh, this is going to be a work boot for construction people. And so surely it changed into something else. And there was a moment where they just didn't have a real cognizance of what was going on, nor were they staffed in their company to deal with it, and I think that happens to a lot of companies when people of color like latch onto products or spaces or brands, like they just don't really know how to they don't know really how to deal with it. And they're walking on eggshells trying to figure out how they can adjust to these new consumers. Because it's not like any company really doesn't want new consumers. They all want to make more money. But in most cases, when they can't recognize the difference between their new consumers and how they communicate, they often say and do things that potentially isolate consumers of color. So, you always have that going on. So you have these companies that are trying to deal with that. And then I think you have people in the space who felt like, white people in the space, in particular from the South, who felt like, oh, this was always just our thing. And so it's not like just our thing anymore. And like, I get it. I don't think that that's necessarily the reality of how this industry was created and like how people of color have played a role in expanding these spirits industries. But I understand where they're coming from. I think in most cases, people are welcoming because the reality is when you go to some of these places where they distill these American spirits like Kentucky, like the economies are upside down. I mean, there's like high unemployment. There's all sorts of stuff going on. You could take the politics and all the other stuff out of it. The reality is you go down there, like unemployment is high and there's a big disparity between, the poor and the rich. And so people who are down there who want to do business, like they're relying on tourism and they're relying on people coming from out of the state wanting to do business with them. And so there is like an open arms scenario. People are like, oh, you're not from here and you want to come down here and spend money and do business? That's great. Like, I'm down with that. But then there's also other people who look at it like, oh, you guys are some carpetbaggers or whatever. I just look at the whole thing like, hey, these are all American products, like we have all these great American companies. The American whiskey industry happens to also have some as well. But, it's not like if you went to Portland to go buy Air Jordans, someone would be like, oh, we always thought we had Air Jordans to ourselves. You know what I'm saying? I could go on with various other things, but, it's just something that's new for them and they're not aware of and how to deal with. And I think in any scenario, you're going to get people who are bad actors. In most cases, even though I've been to distilleries and I've experienced, I think, what people would consider prejudice, and I would consider it mild prejudice, like, going someplace and people being like, are you sure you're in the right place? Because they're not used to seeing people that look like you show up to do a barrel pick. So you always deal with that type of stuff. I just, have a thick skin, and there are things to me that are about prejudice and racism that are inconsequential, and I just ignore them and I keep it moving.
Yeah.
I just don't want to spend the energy on on, you know, creating a conflict with a person who just isn't aware that somebody like me exists. That's like such a pointless conversation as a man of color. Like there's issues that we got to deal with. And then there's issues of ignorance that there are intelligent and easy ways to diffuse them and move on and have people be more mindful of the situation. You know, so you just deal with a lot of that different stuff of people not being used to you being there, other people wanting you to be there because there's money to be made, and all of these like, you know, cross flows of need, want, and aspiration. So anytime you deal with that, it can get crazy. You know, the reverse can happen when white people gentrify neighborhoods of color, you know. And I was
Yes.
listening to this podcast about like how the white people came in and started a fundraising board for the school that didn't have white kids and really invaded the space of the people of color who had previously been running the school board. Like those things are always going to happen, you know, but for the most part, I think bad actors are people who are looking for attention in a different way. We happen to have these social media platforms now where people can say and do things and be nameless. Some of it, I think, is real people, but in my experience, a lot of it is like bots and or, you know, people who are intentionally using, you know, manipulating these accounts for some other purpose. With all of the stuff that I see in politics right now, like when some of the Black Lives Matter things started happening around June, and spirits companies were showing their support for Black Lives Matter causes by posting the black square, there were all these negative comments in those spaces against, you know, anyone of color who was saying, hey, we appreciate the support, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those people were real, and I think some of those people were fake. And I just think it goes to show where we're at in a society that like social media across the board is just being used, you know, to divide people, you know. So it's no different. The comments on like a political person's page, if that person expresses a certain belief or is no different than what happens now on these brand pages. So if Sephora says, hey, Black Lives Matter, you're going to get a whole bunch of spam and bots and like
Right.
accounts to divide whoever is in the Sephora page in the Sephora community. And now you're just seeing the same thing in the spirits and whiskey community. And I think that that's all about foreign actors and political campaigns and COINTELPRO. I don't generally attribute it to like, oh, it's like, you know, Joe Blow, the racist KKK dude from Tennessee who has singled me out on this page and hates me. It's just, you know, it's generally speaking, it's just not that. Like very rarely is it that.
Got it. It was, but well, it was the perfect transition before we get to that. The one thing I thought about when you were saying how white people have gentrified Black spaces, the first thing I thought about was like how they feel like this was their thing, and then how we formed Black fraternities and sororities for our own survival and different things of that nature, but white people have also infiltrated that as well. And so that was something that I thought about too. And, you know, needless to say, that's that. But we both worked at a major corporation. And when you were speaking about the Black Square and people saying Black Lives Matter, I just thought it was very contradictory of the company that we used to work for when they started pouring out this public support. I mean, I got laid off from there, and it pissed me off because the one thing I thought about was, I was like, well, how are y'all supporting and saying Black Lives Matter when Black people weren't in executive level positions or they weren't in positions of power? I know a Black woman that actually got laid off or fired from this man that's oppressive, and that he still gets to work there. And then Nickelodeon is blocking out 8 minutes and 46 seconds of programming, and I could run their whole shit down from working there as well. And so you and I have like kind of talked offline about certain things, but I just wanted to get your thoughts about like these corporations trying to show up like Black is in, and you know, you were at Def Jam, right? And so just that's still a corporate space. I don't know if Def Jam acted like that, but I just kind of want to, you know, bring it to the forefront and talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, corporate media gets really complicated, right? Because the reality is, like, there would be no corporate media without Black people. Like, there just wouldn't. Like, there wouldn't be sports. there wouldn't be any of these TV shows. There wouldn't really be any of this like reality TV stuff. It's just like it is an area that we excel in front of the camera is an easiest way for me to say it, because it's been a space that we've been told is acceptable for us, you know, and so we have been able to use that avenue to, you know, move our families forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we all know like where all, you know, that how rap music has exploded and how that's been tied with sports and all of these things and how that's impacted this American culture that everyone is, you know, with the music and that everyone is so excited and now claims. So we know that that's the case. So when you go to work in any of these companies, you pretty much understand that like the programming on some level has, you know, Black culture in it. And yet, so frequently you see that there are so few people of color, in particular Black people, making any of the decisions about what's going to be shot, who's going to be shot, how they're going to be portrayed, how it's going to be marketed, how it's going to be sold, you know, all of that. So it's just, it's a major corporate problem across the board, not just in media. And I just, you know, it's hard to even put your finger in it because we all know at this point that like there isn't a shortage of Black talent. And
Mm-hmm.
yet when you work at these companies, there's a shortage of Black talent amongst your coworkers. Like it just is what it is. And um, I just think it's really hard for these companies collectively because they all, each company seems to me to have like its own corporate identity, you know, and it has its own ruling class in many ways. Like you'll go to some companies and they'll be like all run by white women, or you'll go to some companies and they're all run by, you know, gay men, and you go to some companies and they're run by Black dudes, or, you know, whatever it is. Like all these companies have ruling classes, and in most cases, those ruling classes, like just like our normal society, proactively, knowingly or unknowingly, but proactively exclude people of color, you know, so they kind of, you know, it becomes very like, yeah, you know, you can make some decisions as long as they're profitable for us, but can you make the decisions? Yeah, no, we're not comfortable with that, you know. So it's something, you know, it's something I dealt with for many, many, many years. There are some companies I've worked at that have been really proactive and been diverse at the top, and there have been some that have not been. And you know, during the time that I worked at Viacom CBS, there were times when it was much more diverse, and there were times when I looked around in my 5-year career and I was like, wow, somehow it's not diverse right now at all. And you know, it's a major problem. It just is a major problem. And I think as much as companies admit that there are issues, they don't really want to cop to the problem. They don't really want to cop to the problem, and nobody really wants to step up and say, the problem is that we only allow, in most cases, you know, people of color, Black people, and women to only get so high in this organization before we say to you, you can't get any higher or we're going to lay you off because we're ultimately not going to have a reason to keep you from getting higher. And then it just becomes a, you know, a legal game, a legal battle, a legal this, a legal that. I think that's just the reality of the situation. They're just, we're not in a place yet. And in particular, people who, you know, you go to these companies and you work with these people, they tend to strike you as being liberal and democratic and supporters of being progressive. And yet, like, they can't see their own blind spots. They can't. And no matter how much you tell them and know how much you point out things that are unfair, like they just can't see it. And I don't know that they're going to see it. And I don't know if they're going to see it without some sort of institutional change in these companies. And normally that's all predicated on profit. So if all of a sudden it was really profitable to have your whole senior team be women and people of color, then it would change. But as long as they don't perceive it that way, and as long as the market doesn't dictate that, then in all likelihood, people are going to always fall back to their own individual prejudices, either recognized or unrecognized, and they're going to carry those out in the workplace just like they carry those out at home and in society, wherever they are. Like, it's just no different. So I just don't think that we can expect that, like, we're going to have a society that's racist fundamentally and has major issues with prejudice across all walks of life, and then think that we're going to see these corporations and they be outliers to the reality of how our society works. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so there's like bigger changes and things need to be made and addressed in order to like make this stuff get more equal, you know. And unfortunately, it just, the way our country is based, it's capitalism and it's based on profits. And so unless you're really hitting people in the head with, you know, the profit argument about why things need to change, it's unlikely that people are going to change them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
So pointedly put.
You know, that's the only thing in this country that's more powerful than racism is money. And so unless you can make the money argument that you need to change racism, the people who are benefiting from racism in most cases don't want to change it. And like I said, some of that is knowing, and some of that is so ingrained that it's unknown, and people don't realize it's a learned behavior they bring into the workplace. And so for us, it's just crazy talk, because, you know, how many times have you been at one of these corporations and gone to the town hall or tuned into the thing and heard, you know, watch the white guy or the white woman get up on the thing and say, we're about diversity and we want to make sure like we're a representative of society and that it's a fair shake and everyone deserves an opportunity to advance and all of that stuff. And you're like, oh, that sounds so dope. I'm so excited about working here. And it just turns out that the infrastructure prevents any of that from happening. So even if that's what they really wanted to happen, they haven't really looked at it in a macro level and said, I've said this, I've spoken it out into the world. Now here's the way we're actually, like, it requires a plan. And a plan requires, you know, someone who made the plan and someone who's going to make sure the plan happens. Like, it can't just be spoken out in the world. Like, everything requires a plan. And so if you say it, that's just not enough. Like, saying it and believing it is not enough. Like, jotting it down and like making it happen just like you would a marketing campaign or shooting a TV series, like, it requires a plan. And so does, you know, what we're talking about. If we really want to see those walls broken down, it requires these companies and these industries to come in and say, this is our actual plan of how we're going to fix that.
Yes, so pointedly put, man. I love that. Last question before we get into this last segment. You having worked in the music industry right now, still connecting the dots to Black seeming trendy. Black women have really been crying out on not feeling protected. We're talking about most recently, at least within our culture, with the whole situation that went down allegedly between Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion, and, you know, and even have been women activists, young women that have gotten killed on what is the word I'm looking for? Is it the predicate? No. What's the word? The P word. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know if it's principle, but we'll walk with that on the principle of on defending Black men, but we're also at the harm of on that other side. And the one thing I thought about was when you worked at VH1, you were very adamant about holding space for Black men that worked in that network or even in that company. What do you think, or what can we actively do? What can Black men actively do to hold space to protect Black women, for Black men that don't feel like they have to protect all Black women or qualify the Black women they want to protect? If that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, all right. So again, we're dealing with some like macro levels here, and we'll boil it down into our industries. But, you know, it's just, I think the broad strokes that we're dealing with right now is like, you know, and we see this with all these police brutality cases, right? There's a broad fear of in particular of Black men, right? That we're feared, right? For whatever reason. I don't think that any of it is really founded, but okay, we'll go from there. We're feared. Black women, I don't perceive that people fear them. I perceive that in all these cases, like, they just don't see them as relevant. You know, it's almost like the Black female life is irrelevant. Like, so when all of these things happen, like the Breonna Taylor stuff, whatever, it's just kind of like a shrug, like, oh, whatever, it's just a Black woman's life. Like, it don't count for nothing. Like, it's not even, you never even hear the same rhetoric when these things happen to Black women and Black men. Like when an altercation happens with a Black man, it's always the same thing from, from the people who were complaining. I feared for my life. And somehow I thought the dude who was running away from me with no weapons was gonna like pull a move out of a video game and like kill me, and I was gonna explode in a bunch of pieces. And I had no option but to draw my firearm and shoot and discharge. Yeah, you don't really hear that about Black women, right? It just comes off more like didn't even matter. It wasn't even consequential. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you know what? We were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that was just a casualty of the situation. Sorry, get over it. And so I think, right now it's like Black men and Black women, we're almost like passing each other in the night. We're like trying to support each other because y'all don't want to are fighting for creating a safe space, in particular for us to not be feared and be perceived in a way that like we always need to be attacked or defended against. We, on the other hand, Black men, I think, are fighting for a scenario where Black women will simply be respected, period, and seen, right, and not overlooked. And so, like, I think in many ways we're fighting these dual fights in society about what we want and what we think is important based on, how much we appreciate the other side of our gender and our race, but like we're almost fighting two different battles at the same time. So I don't know. I think your point is very salient that like we do need to spend more time connecting and building and understanding really what it is that like will be beneficial to the people we're standing next to. So there's that, and that's my very broad stroke approach, feeling on it. I think overall, I know that in all of the jobs that I've ever had, it was always important for me to make sure that there were women working there, and also in particular women of color working there for various reasons I could go into, whether it's from work ethic, knowledge, etc., patience, whatever. I could go into a bunch of different things of why I thought it was important, but it was always important to me to make sure that like women and women of color were represented. So I think from my perspective, like the main thing is, and this may sound even like almost trivial and ridiculous, is like you have to be open-minded that you need those people and that they're valuable, right? So part of the reason I think that I was so successful at Viacom with our content, and even now they're like pulling my content strategies out of the back of the closet and trying to reuse them, because now 3 years after I'm out of the company, they're like, oh wait, this guy's digital strategy was the way we should have been going all this time. Is that, I looked at the content we were doing. In particular, it was directed at women and women of color. And I was like, I need to make sure that I have people who are representative of the shows and of the audience on my staff, so that, they can work with me to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the audience. If you're doing the right thing for the audience, it's going to be good content. It's going to be profitable. So, you can't make things for an audience in most cases if you just don't understand that audience, period.
But that's simple though. I mean, just how white people make content for Black people, but don't want Black people in the room. It's like, it's easy. Put people in the room that reflect your audience.
Yeah, I think it's easy for us to say, but it's not easy for other people to do.
Right. They don't want to, I think.
They have preconceived notions about what it means to, and most of it is just based on ignorance and like, of what it's going to mean to have a table that has 9 people at it and have that table go from, 5 white guys and 4 white women to 3 white guys, 3 white women, and 3 Black women. Like they have preconceived notions about how that's that's somehow going to hamper them, or instead of, understanding what I think I understand, which is that like, it's just been proven that diverse staffs make more profitable companies, but not everyone is aware of that. And also not everyone is ready to deal with it. And it's sad to say that, but it's just like, there are just people out there who are not ready to go into an office and deal with people who don't look like them. Like, it's something that seems so silly to us because we have had to do it forever, including all the way back to when we went to college in most cases, unless you went to an HSBCU. If you went to a predominantly white college as a person of color, then you had to learn to deal with white people in close quarters as your instructors and as your equals as your students, you know, and so we learn and adapt to that at an earlier age, and it carries on when you get into corporate America. But the same isn't true for everyone else. And so even though it seems obvious to us, diversify your portfolio, if it was stocks, that's what you would say, right? You don't want to have one stock, that you don't want to have your whole portfolio be just one stock, unless maybe it's Amazon. But, you know, diversify your portfolio, get a bunch of different things that perform in different ways, that have different price points, blah, 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 blah. And yes, it does seem easy and obvious to us, but I don't think it's easy and obvious to other people. And it's something that as a society, we have to overcome.
Great answer. Okay, I'm getting you into this last segment, short and sweet, called All of the Things. Name one of your biggest highlights at Def Jam, and then now with Taste, Select, and Repeat. Taste, Select, Repeat.
Yes. Okay, let's see. One of my biggest highlights at Def Jam. When we did the Puma, we did 2 shoes with Puma, and we activated 2 times at both Complex Cons to launch those sneakers. And so myself and Noah, my friend James Harris, we worked on them together. That was a major milestone for me because I was a sneakerhead. I'd always been a sneakerhead. I worked at Complex. I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd actually get to design a shoe and not certainly for a major shoe brand, a major brand. And yeah, we were like up in Boston at Puma HQ, like designing these shoes and picking out the materials and the colors. And it actually came out and debuted at Complex Con, and then it got sold in stores, and then it got sold out. And so like the minute that I remember walking into Complex Con in Chicago and seeing this massive display that Puma had erected, and in the middle of this massive display was a shoe that I had helped design with my friends, I was like, it was a moment for me, man. It was a total moment. It was a real like mission accomplished, like bucket list checkbox kind of situation for me. And so that was a big deal. And I helped broker that deal between Def Jam and Puma. So I helped make that deal happen. So it was more than just like, oh, I designed the shoe. I was actually the businessman behind the deal with my team who helped make it happen. So that was a big deal for me. With Taste, Select, Repeat, which is my new company, the e-commerce liquor store. This is interesting, right? So the day I got my liquor license, we got our liquor license, was a big deal because they are hard to get. And, you know, I had worked at it so hard all through COVID, like to deal with the whole situation. I was hustling so hard through COVID to get this company off the ground. And literally in August, I got I got the email that said, you know, this company, Taste, Select, Repeat, now officially has a liquor license. And it was something I've been working toward for many years. And so that day was a big day for me. I'll always remember it. I'll always remember also the day that we drove down in March, right before COVID started, to turn in our application to get the liquor license, my partner and I. And, you know, it's been a real DIY operation. I mean, I've got so many, man. I remember the first barrel pick I ever did at Four Roses, and my first trip to, you know, that was my second trip to Kentucky. And interestingly enough, there were about 4 people I met on that trip who are now people who are not only my close friends, but I actually do business with now that I started my new company. But I think in recent history, the thing that I'm going to I'll put a pin in this one is the day that we went to Hill Rock Estate Distillery, which is a New York distillery, a high-end distiller, and we picked out our first single malt whiskey, which is more like a Scotch and American bourbon. But unbeknownst to me at that time, it was gonna end up being the first bottle that we were gonna launch for the liquor store, and we thought we were gonna launch with a different bottle, but COVID messed up the whole timing of it. And I had such an awesome day. It was myself, another brother who works at Other Half Brewery, which is a beer company run by, you know, there's a bunch of people of color over there, and they do amazing stuff. My coworker Pierre, who's a black dude, my other friend Mike Weinman, you know, who's a Jewish guy. And we were literally like the Benetton crew show up at this high-end distillery. And we're welcomed by the owners, Kathy Franklin and Jeffrey, who, you know, have this amazing operation. They've been running for 10 years. And they were just like, we love that you guys are from New York and that you represent our area. And we just want to make sure that everything goes well and we do everything we can to like work together. It was like at that moment that I was like, wow, everything I thought about why I wanted to create this company, to like show up someplace to a distillery to people I had never met before and have them essentially repeat back to me what was, in my mind, the mission statement behind what I was doing, and then end up picking there and that being the first thing we put on sale. It's like definitely something I won't forget. It was like reaffirming my business and why we were doing it right as it started.
Now I'm gonna come drink with you, man. You're walking distance, so I'm gonna come.
Please do. I mean, the one thing I will tell you is, I got a lot of knowledge in the spirits game, and like I've spent a lot of time and energy training myself on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And, the stuff that we select is really exclusive, and, it's not like the prices are crazy. It's not like, oh, these bottles are like $10,000. I mean, we have bottles that we sell from $50 and, and they go as expensive as, I don't know, like 300, but we have a lot of stuff that's a reasonable price. But for me, the objective was to make sure that like people, and in particular people of color, were getting the opportunity to discover all of this great stuff that, isn't as regularly available as if you just pop into your liquor store and be like, no, off the shelf.
Yeah.
There's a lot more stuff out there besides Henny.
When the Henny's in the system.
So I mean, I'm a living, breathing, knowledgeable person who knows about these things, and I'm just trying to spread the wealth and and also just enjoy myself.
Yeah, gotta plug you for sure. Can we also plug this painting in the back?
Oh, okay. So this is
show her some love.
Yes, this is my wife's painting. Her name is Anna Bravo. This is part of her Eternal Spring series from a couple of years ago, but she's, was born in Mexico, came here when she was young, and ultimately became a naturalized citizen. And she has a lot of paintings that are about her experience as a Mexican-American, and growing up in California and farming and all of these other things. And she's got some really beautiful paintings. Anna Bravo Art on Instagram is where you can find her.
Speaking of your business, how can they find you, follow you, support what you all have going on?
Okay, so the website for our liquor store is tasteselectrepeat.com. So you can spell that out, tasteselectrepeat.com. And you can sign up for a membership there. Memberships are free, but we just basically screen everyone to, one, make sure that they're over 21, two, that they're in a location that we can legally ship to, and three, that they're interested in kind of the types of products that we're offering, because supplies are limited. So that's the easiest place. You sign up there, and then we go through all your stuff. And if you're good to go, if they write in there, my referral is from Georgette Pierre, then you're definitely going to get in. And then on social media, which I'm not tremendously active, like I'm a little bit active. I try to post stuff about what we're doing, when we get articles written about us, when we're at distilleries, when we have new bottles coming out. You can follow me at Neat Rocks Cocktail. So 3 ways I like to drink my whiskey. So neat, on the rocks, or in a cocktail.
Oh, that's what that. Oh, I never understood that. Okay, I never thought about that.
Cocktail, yeah.
I did it.
3 ways. That's the 3 ways I drink my whiskey. Either just straight, neat, on ice, rocks, or in a cocktail. Neat Rocks Cocktail.
Yes, don't y'all have I thought y'all had an Instagram for Taste Select Repeat too, or no?
We do. It's private. We just keep it private. So now what happens is when people sign up on the website and we approve them, we also ask them for their Instagram account. And if they have one, then we can contact them on Instagram and say, hey, throw us a follow. This is essentially the secondary area where we launch products. So just in case we send you an email and you don't get it, you'll always be able to see the information on it on our Instagram account.
That's what's up. Oh, thank you so much, man.
Happy to be here.